Alright, just a small adjustment to the volume level and here you go. Brand new Voxophone Mark II is ready to go, with all the upgrades made possible thanks to your efforts, Kirish. It should have no delays right now, not to mention that it looks way better than that collar Poniewski made for you as first iteration. Go on, give it a try.
Yes, we can hear the improvement already, Professor. We are happy to have been useful during creation of this device.
Don't mention it. I know that trip to the capital must have been hard for you even without all those neural sensors strapped into your brain, but you've done splendidly, and thanks to all the data we gathered, your people and you will be able to integrate into our society even better.
Indeed, the ability to engage in verbal communications without unnecessary delays will certainly improve general disposition towards the Kithri. We are aware that these pauses between sentences were unsettling to some of you.
Well, if anyone complained, they should probably be reminded that in their natural conditions, Kithri were communicating by ejecting clouds of spores into the air. Compared to that, waiting 3 seconds for an answer isn't that disturbing, don't you think? I hope no one gave you a hard time because of that.
You misunderstood our words, Professor, though we appreciate your protective instincts towards us. While it is true that some people were unnerved by the way we talked, we were never met with hostility, at least not the open kind. Some of the humans on Ortus were shocked by our presence, and we felt that some consider us beneath their notice, but those situations were few and far between. The vast majority of those we encountered welcomed us as friends and equals, and we spent a great many evenings answering questions about our life and society, even though there isn't much to say, really.
It all takes time, Kirish. We developed our current society over the course of thousands of years. We were shaped by countless events, good and bad, and the end result is the OCN you see today. Your people, with our help, bypassed this entire process, so naturally it's going to take some time for you to find your place in our nation.
We do believe we already made first steps on that path, Professor. Though most of our people still live on Curaçao, many willingly leave safety of their habitats in order to explore and meet new people. I do not know if this was intentional, but curiosity towards other species that you manifest, Professor, is clearly visible in the rest of my kind. We wish to go out there and explore, and from what your Chancellor told us, soon we might have a chance to become just as important in our expansion as you are.
I see. Interestingly, I had no idea you and Chancellor Tezza had a private meeting, but I'm happy to hear that he has plans for you. I just hope this plan of his will be worthy of your potential.
You do not have to worry about us, Professor. We are aware that to become fully approved citizens of your nation, we have to work just as hard as you do. And even if we have to work harder, then we shall persevere, for it is the only way we can repay you for bringing us into the light. No, do not try to downplay it, Professor. What is normal to you is still new and amazing to us. Simple things like thoughts or memory. We are sure you have some memories from your early years. We do not. Before the uplift, there was only darkness, only cold and hunger, only this primal drive to consume and survive. To be able to think, to remember and to learn feels overwhelming at times, but fascinating. We had thoughts before, but now we can think about what we think. Introspection, we believe you call it.
Indeed, I see that we still have much to learn about each other, Kirish, but I'm glad to hear that you enjoy your new sentience. But there's one thing still bugging me. Why do you always refer to yourself as we? After all, you are a single individual.
Are we? But wherever we went, your people use a term they to describe us, which indicates multiple beings, so we adapted to use their description.
Of course you did, but I think I know why they call you that. You Kithri are, unlike us, genderless. For humans, it's simple to attach a he or she to both of our genders, but it's slightly more complicated with you. So, since most people don't know how to address you, they tend to stick with neutral they. And before you correct me, no, we do not call our fellow citizens it, no matter how different they are from us.
Hello fellow humans, and welcome back to episode 6 of Second Chance. When we were here last time, we heard a speech of our Chancellor, Mr. Tezza, in which he laid out the plans for humanity for the coming years. And because of that, we now have two main goals. Goal number 1 is to protect our citizens and our borders by eliminating the void cloud that lurks in the clue system, very close to our home territories. For now though, our fleet will stall that attack for as long as possible, to ensure that we have as much of an advantage as we can possibly get. After all, we don't know just how strong this enemy is,
and sending our fleet to die is not something we're aiming at. Ideally, we want to eliminate the cloud without taking losses, and what better way to ensure that outcome than to have overwhelming firepower? The second goal is more in line with our usual business. We want to colonize the Upshola system, which has the potential to become the main mining and manufacturing center of our entire civilization. There are 2 habitable planets there, Upshola 9, a freezing Arctic planet that has, despite its climate, surprisingly pleasant weather, and there's Upshola 3a, a scorching hot desert planet that orbits a massive methane T-class star, which, combined with the radiation from the main sun of this system, makes it almost uninhabitable and rather dangerous to live on. But, despite all that, it's actually going to be the first goal of our colonization, because Upshola 3a has more minerals within its crust than all our other planets combined. With a bit of preparation, we could turn this planet into main extraction center for our society, and that's what we're currently planning to do. But there's another reason for our expansion in that direction, something that, due to its mysterious nature, was not mentioned in Tessa's speech. Back when we were exploring this system, we came into orbit of Upshola 1, a molten volcanic planet very close to the system's central star, and on its surface we have found something that once again surprised our science teams. There was a crater on the surface of the planet, and in that crater we have found a bunch of destroyed spaceships, yet another relic from the past that we uncover every now and then. That in itself was exciting. You don't find derelicts from millennia ago every day after all, but what truly made this discovery groundbreaking was the material these ships were built out of, an unknown solid metal that, upon closer examination, proved to actually have some properties of a liquid. Namely, if you carved off a chunk of the hull, it would go into a semi-solid state and fix the damage completely on its own, without any outside interference. The crew of CSV Outlier ran every test they could think of, but in the end they were unable to determine what causes this peculiar ability, and in fact they weren't able to tell what that metal even is. Still, they grabbed as many samples as they could for further analysis back home, but one thing was certain: this bizarre compound, this living metal, as our researchers started to call it, could have an absolute ton of applications, once we figure out how it works, that is. Unfortunately, when the samples reached our Science Council on Ortus, they turned out to be just as puzzled as our explorers, and, for a time at least, the project to uncover living metal's secrets will have to be postponed. The sad truth is that we're simply not advanced enough to even conceive an idea like that, let alone put it into reality. Sure, we could just put all our other projects on hold and spend the next 2 or 3 decades banging our heads against the wall, and perhaps we would finally figure it out, but for now we're just going to leave it. The samples are safe on Ortus, and soon the planet they came from will be within our sphere of influence, allowing our scientists easy access to the entire deposit, and, perhaps more importantly, it will ensure that no one else has access to this mysterious tech. One day we will devote our resources and full attention to mastering this living metal, but for now we have more grounded matters to attend to, like building up our fleet and another one of our science projects, terraforming. The idea behind this was a simple one. Our people are not very good when it comes to living in conditions they are not used to. We are biophobic, agoraphobic, and mostly underground species right now, and that means that living on a desert planet like Upshola 3a or mangrove planet like DuX3 would be an absolute nightmare for our people. However, while we are good biologists, we are not that good. We can't, for now at least, overcome our natural lack of adaptability, but although we can't live on other worlds because they are too different, we can do something else. We can change these worlds themselves. Of course, it would be time-consuming and extremely expensive process, but if we could master the principles behind planetary terraforming, which is something Professor Tanwar and her team are trying to do right now, we could overcome our greatest weakness and reshape the galaxy to suit our needs. Who knows, maybe one day we'll even be able to make a world that would be a paradise for all life forms. Just think of the business opportunities that would come with such knowledge. But for now, we have more martial matters on our minds. While our Bioshock division works on civilian projects, our physics and applied sciences divisions are busy ensuring that our fleet remains competitive. Seeing Alir ships certainly caused some ripples among our, up to this point, peacefully minded researchers. And their work is certainly impressive. The latest project to come from Latin of Steam is a ship-to-ship fusion missile, which is basically a powerful atomic bomb that can be launched at anyone that looks at us funny. It's more powerful than our lasers, missiles can be fired at longer ranges than them, and crucially, it is equipped with an electronic guidance system, so we can just fire this nuke at the target and forget about it. It was a bit more tricky to ensure that these rockets can differentiate between friend or foe, but we finally managed that as well, and now the missiles are approved for mass production and installation aboard our ships. And, as you might have seen back there, we also work on a way to counter missiles ourselves. After all, it's never a good idea to build a weapon that you can't defend yourself against. So, to ensure that we won't one day get nuked by our own missiles, Dr. Puniewski and his team are currently working on countermeasures system. Basically, they try to link up small point defense kinetic guns to onboard computers to make sure that these guns can intercept and destroy incoming missiles before they can reach their targets. Now, some might think that it's a job more suited for our engineers, but in truth, making those point defense guns effective is far more complicated than it initially seems. First, you have to make sure that your ship computer can track incoming missiles, that, on a cosmic scale, even compared with the ships, are extremely small and move with breathtaking speed to cover hundreds of kilometers of distance between vessels. So that in itself requires powerful scanners, but then you also need to make sure that your point defense can differentiate between your own missiles and those launched by potential enemies. And finally, the computer needs to prioritize which missiles to target first, which ones can safely be avoided, which ones pose direct danger to the ship, and which ones can be dangerous to the fleet at large. It's simply impossible to delegate this job to a human gunner, and that is why our best programmer is on the case. We'll just have to remind him to actually build a PD gun after he finishes coding. And once that's done, he'll have to do some checks on the sensors aboard our science ships. As you could have seen there, CSV Tesla has found an anomaly that indicates that a star is aging at an accelerated rate. All fine and interesting except for this. The sensors picked this anomaly on a planet, not a star. We'll still check it out, just in case. Who knows, maybe this hothouse world actually is a star of a class that we have never even thought possible, but it's most probable that we just have a bug in our systems. Best to fix it now before it makes us miss something important. So, we have built 4 new corvettes and upgraded the existing ones with fusion missile launchers. Now, it's finally time to test them in real combat, even though surreal would be a far better word. In August 2219, Strike Force Manticore under command of Admiral Shu Lin received orders to move into Clue System and eliminate the entity known as the Void Cloud that dwells there. And let's face it, this is not something our people are prepared for, despite spending last year or so training for this specific purpose. After all, we don't even know what that thing is. Is it alive? If yes, then is it organic, or is it somehow a sentient being made out of pure energy? And if it isn't alive, then why is it aggressive? Is it an animal that evolved in dark space? Or maybe it's a semi-sentient weapon built by those who lived here before us? We don't know, and we can't know. The cloud reacts violently to all research attempts, and after all those years, I think it's safe to say that peaceful approach will lead us nowhere. So, we are going to fly to Clue System and, hopefully, either pacify or outright destroy it. Maybe then, once it stops electrocuting everything in sight, our research teams will finally be able to tell us just with what we're dealing here. So, the time has come to finally test humanity's mettle in space combat. But although our fleet is already in Clue System, they are not going to attack right away. See, here's the thing. Our military, both the fleet and our ground forces, came to conclusion that while command of our armed forces is technically in the hands of the Council, when it comes to actual combat scenarios, politicians stationed on faraway worlds shouldn't really be able to interfere. As such, Ocean leadership will have no ability to affect tactics of Admiral Lin's fleet. As soon as the missiles start flying, she will be at the helm, and will only be able to hope that she makes good decisions. But while the Council can't help with tactics, it can help with strategy, which is exactly what they did. You might have noticed that we have a third science ship in our civilian fleet, the CSV Ambassador, under command of Proctor Shivangi Bhatt, who uses this ship as a sort of mobile laboratory. Basically, she just stays in the orbit above Ortus and conducts experiments on behalf of the Science Council. For now, she will be on leave. Ocean agents took the ship, programmed the computers with some combat maneuvers, and put a skeleton crew of robots on. The idea here is to use CSV Ambassador as a distraction. The ship will circle around the void cloud and approach it from the outer edges of the system, drawing its attention, allowing Admiral Lin a chance to move in undetected and open engagement on her own terms. Granted, this puts our science ship in danger, and it's actually slightly more expensive than a corvette, so it's not exactly an expendable bait, but it increases the safety of our crews, and we also have another ace up our sleeve. All of our wormhole modulators have an option of an emergency jump. Basically, in times of danger, the crew can overload the reactor and open a small, unstable wormhole practically everywhere. It's dangerous as hell and it's still untested, but it gives us an option to run away if things go wrong. And the best thing? Because civilian vessels don't use most of their energy on powering weapon systems, opening an emergency wormhole is way quicker than on military vessels. So, if the void cloud proves too strong, CSV Ambassador can always flee, but I really hope it won't come to this. We shouldn't open unstable dimensional portals without a good reason. This is it. Few months later, CSV Ambassador approached the void cloud and was immediately greeted with a massive energy discharge that almost completely overloaded our deflector shields. In that same moment, our robotic crew sprang to life and began wide evasive maneuver, programmed in hopes of keeping Cloud's attention. And, as you can see far in the distance, it worked. Despite distances of hundreds of kilometers, our corvettes all unleashed the barrage of fusion missiles that began their quick, though extremely slow in cosmic terms, flight at the distracted void cloud. And allow me to speak out of character for a moment, so we can establish some ground rules about combat. While Stellaris is real nice with its portrayal of distances and sublight speed, it all kinda falls apart when it comes to actual battles. All Paradox games suffer from this. For example, a battle in Europa Universalis can take for over half a year, and by the same mechanic, our corvettes fire their missiles with several days between each launch. This, of course, makes very little sense, but it's simply one of the game mechanics that has to be there in order for everything to work correctly gameplay-wise. So, we're going to skirt around it a bit. Instead of pretending that battle takes place over the course of several weeks or even months, we'll simply assume that it takes place on the last day of actual battle, and what we see is just a visual representation or, say, prediction model on one of our ship computers. And by that same logic, we'll slightly lower the distances to slightly more realistic ones. Basically, each point of range on our weapons is a kilometer, so if our lasers have a range of 40, then that means they can be fired at a distance up to 40 kilometers, simple as that. That gives us best of both worlds. That portrayal of space combat fought over extreme distances is far more realistic and plausible than something that we see in, for example, Star Wars. Sure, it wouldn't allow for cinematic shots, as you would mostly be firing at a small dot on the sensors, but hey, we already have cinematic shots provided by the game itself. Just assume that what we see is a massively zoomed-in version of events, and let the suspension of disbelief take care of the rest. Alright, disclaimer over, back to the front. To our fleet's surprise, it turned out that the void cloud could not only discharge energy to attack us, but it also projected a field of it that worked almost exactly as our deflector shield. As mentioned before, our crews had no idea what to expect, but they anticipated that few explosions would be enough for the cloud to die, or to dissipate, or to turn itself off. Instead, we fired volley after volley, and for a good while the cloud just shrugged our attacks off. And remember that those are not just some conventional explosives, but nuclear detonations. So that has obviously unnerved our crews, and in response to that, Admiral Lin ordered a new tactic. Initially, the plan was to surround the void cloud and fire everything we have at it. Simple but effective. However, Admiral Lin noticed that our missiles outranged natural defenses of our enemy, and so she ordered most of her ships to pull out and continue the missile barrage, while she and several other ships would stay close and keep the cloud's attention. In a show of bravery, or stupidity depending on the outlook, her flagship Spitfire took the brunt of the attack, which caused it to lose its shields, which then led to serious loss of structural integrity. But just as things started to look dire, one of the explosions overloaded the protective energy shield around the cloud, and few detonations and laser shots later, it has dissipated into nothingness, leaving behind only slightly chaotic energy signature. And then there was silence. For a moment, all crews of Task Force Manticore watched as their mysterious enemy disappeared in a bright explosion. And then, one by one, all comm channels erupted with thunderous cheers. On 23rd of August 2220, humanity fought its first battle in space and was thoroughly and utterly victorious. Not a single ship was lost, and though there were some wounded on board of Admiral Lin's Spitfire, they were electrocuted after corvette lost its shields, we have won this fight without a single fatal casualty. Now, Proctor Butt will be able to return to her ship and finally lead a scientific expedition to remains of the Void Cloud, and perhaps we'll finally be able to tell just what exactly we have killed. As for the fleet, Admiral Lin ordered her crews to patch up the wounded, commence some critical repairs, and return home to Ortus, as they all deserved a celebration. Back in Ortus, our politicians celebrated as well. Just recently, Chancellor Teza had won elections once again, beginning his 4th term as a leader of OCN. For him, this victory was the success he needed to fully cement his power as the Chancellor. The Innovation Party was riding high for years, but now the popular support for them skyrocketed on an unprecedented scale. It was time to make the final move, and the Chancellor knew that after everything that happened, no one will have the guts to oppose him, and humanity will achieve something that he had dreamed of ever since he began his career in politics. He would have to proceed slowly and cautiously, and it would probably still be several years before the final victory, but he knew that for the future of humanity, he has to be successful.
Admiral, please, there is no need for all this yelling.
No need? Chancellor, what you did last year was basically election rigging but in white gloves.
I assure you, Admiral, the elections were as transparent and orderly as ever. I have no idea where that rigging came from, but
don't treat me like an idiot, Chancellor. You know full well what I'm talking about. Yes, the elections were transparent, but you made sure to be the only viable candidate by sending almost everyone away. Kuo is exploring some distant stars, Lachinov is on Redamon Prime doing some excavations, and I was on Clue, on your orders no less, fighting that blasted cloud. The only person that was left during the elections was Tanwa, but for some reason she gracefully stepped down, convincing her supporters to vote for you. Correct me if I'm wrong, but all those situations together don't really sound like a coincidence to me.
First, I have no control over Professor Tanwa's actions. If she wanted to...
Bullshit! Everyone knows you're together, so if you could just grow a pair and admit it publicly, it would have saved us a lot of trouble. Now enough lies. A more impulsive admiral would have already parked their fleet in orbit above your office and arrested you at gunpoint, but luckily for you, I'm reasonable. So stop jumping around and give me an honest answer.
I do not appreciate threats, Admiral, and regrettably I have to inform you that you couldn't do such thing even if you tried. Your ships are in dock, and without confirmation from both me and Prime Minister Ishii, your men can't even turn on the radio. But you are honest, and I can appreciate that, so let me repay in kind. I meddled in the elections because that is what humanity needs in the long term. Unity, Admiral, or rather unification. Nations of the Council may work together for now, but how long do you think it will last? How long before a new Chancellor, unaccustomed to political climate of OCN, would make a mistake and plunged us into a civil war? I know that most people think that I just sit on a golden throne giving orders, but in truth I do more to keep this nation together than the rest of the Council combined. You think you or other candidate would do better? Shortly before you arrived, I had to prevent presidents of Nautilus Union and Manikara Polity from knocking each other's teeth out. They apparently spent last 2 years in a border dispute over some meaningless, desolate town that has no strategic or economic value whatsoever. And yet they keep bickering, simply because these two particular cretins are too foolish and too greedy to back down. And this is just the beginning. Next, we have Confederation of the Steppes. They are basically warlords clinging to nationalistic values of old Earth. They think that just because they live in one place, they are better than everyone else. And as you might expect, keeping them contained so they don't raid each other every month is a diplomatic nightmare. Then, led by Demetrius Sinon and his ilk, there are Evimeria mercantile city-states on northern and southern poles, thinking only how to get rich of conflicts between other people. Then there's the Kata Republic, sitting on 80% of our agriculture, just waiting for a reason to cut the flow of food off. Next to them we have Yalcha Stratocracy, who supply the majority of our marshals and marines. They have soldiers, but they don't have farms, so I surely don't have to explain to you why exactly their presence at the Kata border scares the hell out of me. And of course there's Zayervadi with their endless mines and factories and their complete lack of understanding of trade relations. For now they work together, kept in check by the fact that their people are obsessing over OCN's ideas. But for how long? How long until one of those fools who lead them will decide that he wants all of our hard work for themselves and his privileged citizens? I can't and I won't allow it, Admiral. We must unite once and for all and close this debate forever. Look at the Alir if you need confirmation. They dissolved their countries ages ago and could mop the floor with us if they wanted.
I see, and if you would just talk to me beforehand, Chancellor, I'd agree with you. But now, after listening to this tirade, I have to wonder, what makes you the most qualified man for the job of our unification? Because to me, you sound just like those other politicians you mentioned. Admiral Lin, I do not claim that humanity should rally behind me, only that they should unite. So far, we got lucky, very lucky. The galaxy around us is mostly peaceful and our new neighbors are friendly, but I know this will not hold. Call it intuition, call it paranoia, call it however you wish, but for the last few years I had this endless feeling of inescapable dread, and it tells me that soon our bright-eyed optimism may be brutally checked. I appreciate your honesty, Chancellor, but I'm not going to accept your actions simply because you feel bad. There has to be more to it. Very well. We, the Xenology Division and I, found something. A faint signal coming out of the stars slightly out of our current reach. A message that we cannot decipher, but the sounds surrounding it we can, because they were with our race since the very beginning of our civilization. But I can't say more, not here. Here, take this datapad. If you want, go to the Ortus spaceport and show it to the security teams. They will lead you where you need to go. Listen for yourself. Maybe then you'll realize why we need to unite, and that soon, Admiral, we might need your fleet once again. Okay, hold on a second, Lachinov. Everyone ready? Good. Then the doors are locked, the jammers are on, and a company of marshals will ensure that our meeting won't be interrupted. Now, ladies and gentlemen of both councils, I want to listen to Professor Lachinov. Go on, tell them exactly what you told me. As you wish, Chancellor, but I hope to the stars that you trust everyone in that room. I don't even want to think what will happen if this information leaks to the public without supervision. Anyway, let's get to business. As some of you are aware, some time ago our rangers have found an odd, pyramid-shaped building located in one of the more remote valleys of Redaman Prime. They called it in, and Adhira's division sent out an archaeological team, but after just a few days they called for someone with more engineering expertise. That's where I came in, and as soon as I arrived on the site 3 months ago, I immediately realized why they called for me. This pyramid is a marvel of engineering. It is entirely made out of some sort of black, non-transparent crystal, extremely durable and, most importantly, not native to any of the planets that we have explored so far, which leads us to believe that it is somehow artificial. Regardless, the entire pyramid is made out of a single piece of this crystal. We have found no structural joints or connections in any point of the entire structure, and at first we thought that maybe this crystal has similar properties to the living metal from Upshola system, but few samples later we learned that this wasn't the case. If you damage it, it stays damaged. But here's the thing. As we were gathering those samples, my team and I don't know how to explain it. We felt like we shouldn't damage the pyramid, even in such a small way as chipping a piece off to test in the lab. Overall, this was one of the first things we noticed, something that both the rangers who found this building and archaeologists who explored it felt too. This place, it feels like we're somehow, I don't know, attuned to it. I don't know how to explain it, but let's just say this. When we entered the pyramid, which is filled with a maze of corridors, we immediately knew where to go. Even though we were there for the first time, we knew exactly where to turn to reach the main hall. Well, from our encounter with the Alir, we have learned that just because a building is made by alien civilization, it doesn't exactly mean that it is completely impossible to navigate. We all think in similar ways. Architecture has to be functional, so perhaps you just followed your instincts. After all, pyramid is one of the most optimal shapes for a building. Back on Earth, cultures that never even met each other built pyramids all across the globe. Maybe you just reached the central chamber because your genetic memory led you. We thought of that, Professor Tanwa, but there's a problem in your theory. The main hall we reached was not the central chamber. What we reached was located in the southern part of the pyramid, slightly below ground, and it's some sort of command center. And there our sensors picked up something else, a signal that seems to be originating from someplace outside of the pyramid, but was accumulating in this single out-of-the-way room. We ran it through our sensors, and soon we found out that it originates from dozens of places all across the galaxy, and all those signals are sent to the exact same spot, the pyramid we're standing in right now. But that's not the end. Though we can't decipher the location of most of the signal origin points, we have managed to pinpoint two of them, Skorom 4 and Nexon. Those brainwave pillars we have found all those years ago, somehow over hundreds of light years, they are linked with that pyramid in a way we never even thought possible. All those brainwaves accumulate in this very room I'm standing in right now, and after spending several days inside, we realized that something has changed. Not within the pyramid, but within us, me and my team. let me just show you this. Okay, it's a levitating pencil. Nice trick and all, but does it have a point? Do you try to tell us that this pyramid can alter gravity? No, Roman, the pyramid is not doing it. I am doing it. I don't know how, I don't know why, but I think of this pencil floating in the air and it just happens. I think about it being on fire and, as you can see, it is now on fire. Ladies and gentlemen, I do not know how to explain it. I honestly don't. This is as far away from my field of study as it can be. I am an engineer. I solve practical problems, but this psionic power is completely and utterly beyond my comprehension. I will turn this pyramid upside down to find a logical solution, but I'm going to need as much help as I can get. And on the off chance that this thing is real, that by entering this pyramid we could achieve power to alter reality with our thoughts, then I don't even know what this would mean for us. This discovery outshines everything we have witnessed so far. Chancellor, counselors, fellow scientists, it is up to us to figure out how to use this knowledge for the benefit of mankind. This is not something that we can treat lightly. So, our leadership is still reeling from the shock of our latest discovery, and almost every single project has been delayed in order to focus on that crystal pyramid that has apparently awakened something within the minds of our population. But just a few weeks after that revelation, operators of our long-range comm arrays picked up something they dreamed of for years, but never really expected to see. A communication signal, oddly in our tongue, that originated from some faraway point outside the range of our wormhole generators. The signal was immediately decoded and brought to the Council, and it turned out to be a welcoming message from yet another spacefaring alien race. But as our politicians and researchers gathered to listen to it, it quickly became obvious that this welcome is way colder than the previous one. In short, the message came from a nation of dragon-like reptilians who call themselves Yanari. Apparently, they were aware of our presence for some time now, though they haven't told us for how long, but to put it bluntly, they were not impressed. In fact, the Yanari have only sent this message to warn us against approaching their territory. They were, in their own words, a sovereign state that has no intentions of letting aliens parade through their territory. The rest of the message was polite, though, as mentioned before, extremely cold and almost hostile, and in the end it left almost nothing to the imagination. The Yanari were clearly disgusted by the very idea of sharing the galaxy with other races, and in quick, brutally honest words, they assured us that they will not be willing to engage in any sort of diplomacy, and any attempts to initiate them from our side will be viewed as acts of hostility. In fact, few days later they sent another message, in which they officially forbade our vessels from entering their territory, claiming that any Xeno found within their borders will be viewed as a spy and treated accordingly. The Council listened to this message, went for a quick break, and just an hour later they sent the exact same words back to the Yanari. We may be all for meeting new cultures, but if they're not going to be friendly, then we're not going to be either. And that was it. No delegations were sent, no diplomatic channels were open, and a cold silence fell above our nations. In all honesty, the Council was still surprised by the message from these reptilians. After all, humanity never found even a slightest hint about their existence, so our politicians wonder just how exactly we have been found. And that's where Alir Ambassador came in. Turns out, the Alir already had some run-ins with the Yanari. In fact, it was their very presence that forced our friendly bag aliens to invest so heavily in their defensive fleet. Because, as it turns out, while the Yanari are xenophobes, they are also slavers. Their entire culture revolves around caste society, at the bottom of which are endless masses of slaves waiting to be exploited by their masters. And from the words of Alir Ambassador, it seems that some time ago, the Yanari have raided several of their civilian ships and outposts, and kidnapped some of their citizens. So perhaps they have learned about us from them. But that doesn't matter now. What matters is the fact that our galaxy suddenly stopped being a peaceful place. Among the stars, there are those who wish to see us dead or enslaved, and it's a fact that we cannot simply ignore. We cannot allow ourselves to be caught unprepared. A wise man once said, "Know thy enemy." Keeping that in mind, almost every single sensor has been pointed at Yanari League in order to gather every scrap of data we could possibly find. But while this long-range spying was taking place, our explorers continued their quest to chart the galaxy for our people. And, as we soon learned, the galaxy was still not out of surprises. While the crew of CSV Outlier were scanning the lone star of Myrenius, they have found some bizarre particles that, no matter how they looked at it, simply shouldn't be there. This prompted a more thorough investigation, and soon we have learned that the photosphere of Myrenius housed several microscopic wormholes. That in itself was as outlandish as it gets, but that's not the end of the report, because, as it turned out, these wormholes were linked to a completely different dimension, impossible to perceive by our human brains. Commander Giraud assured us that these wormholes are safe, but nonetheless the Council decided to, for now at least, put this system on the off-limit list. We already have enough on our heads with discovery of psionics and xenophobe dragons. Fiddling with another dimensions can wait. For now. Still, we continued our exploration. Another star on the list, Tronde, was just as lonely as Merinnius, and it just floated on its own in the void. But while the star itself was rather unremarkable, and the process of scanning it was just a boring routine for Outlier's crew, that routine was suddenly shaken by unexpected arrival of a spacefaring vessel. At first, Commander Giraud gave an order to retreat, as she was expecting Yannari raiders, but soon she realized that this alien ship was not hostile. In fact, it immediately took evasive actions, as if unsure of our motives. So, our explorers decided to stay, and as they focused their attention on the alien vessel, they realized that, despite it sounding completely improbable, it was their counterpart. The ship sported no weapons, and it had powerful sensors, same as CSV Outlier. So, despite being afraid, Commander Giraud decided to remain in Tronde and at least try to establish communications. And few weeks later she was successful, mostly thanks to translation programs written by Dr. Poniewski and improved by Professor Tanwa. The aliens, now known as Yadra, proved to be peaceful members of a feudal-like kingdom that, just like Yannari League, lied just outside of our reach. The first contact went relatively well, data was exchanged and diplomatic channels were opened, but with each passing day our relations grew colder. As servants of King Hask Gentar Mezak, who is the sole undisputed king of Yadra, learned of our society, they became more and more appalled by their, as they said, lack of structure. From what we know, the Yadra are a harmonious collective, a highly stratified feudal society where everyone has a specified place under the leadership of their king. Except that, to our surprise, it seems that this system works well for them. If we tried to implement a monarchy like this, someone somewhere would almost certainly rebel, either to break free or to gain absolute power. But the Yadra are different. Their society is a peaceful one, with its members accepting their lot in life without complaint. So naturally, when they heard of our outlandish concept of democracy, they were repulsed to the very core. So much, in fact, that they immediately closed their borders to us to prevent us from spreading our chaotic, uncoordinated, egalitarian nonsense into their lands. And after that, they closed all channels, as if trying to pretend that we do not exist. Not an ideal beginning, true, but at the very least they are not hostile. If Yadra are just going to sit within their borders and ignore us, we are happy to do the same. For a while, at least. But fortunately, among all those recent grim news, we finally received some good ones. During exploration of Bera system, CSV Outlier came into orbit of an ocean planet of Bera 2, which, upon closer examination, proved to be wondrous, if Commander Giraud is to be believed. Turns out, the endless oceans of this planet are filled with amoeba colonies that can stretch for kilometers. Within those colonies, billions and billions of these microorganisms feed and reproduce, creating nutrient networks that can potentially feed not only the amoeba, but also would-be colonists. Not to mention the fact that larger of these colonies show some limited signs of actual intelligence. Now, the implications of this discovery are difficult to understate. Potentially, Bera 2 could become both breadbasket world and a major center for all sorts of biological research, not to mention the fact that tourists from other planets would certainly pay tons of money to see this phenomenon with their own eyes. But that still wasn't it, as Bera 2 had one more surprise in store for us. The initial report mentioned amoeba colonies showing signs of sentience, which was fascinating on its own. But deeper in the oceans, we have encountered something even more bizarre. Huge groups of fish moving and acting together like a single organism. At first, it seemed relatively normal. After all, back on old Earth, fish often grouped together for protection, but this time their interactions were far more complicated, so much that they prompted more extensive study. And together with our researchers from Redaman Prime, Commander Giraud reached the following conclusion. The fish on Bera 2 communicate using the exact same brainwaves as those we encountered in that mysterious pyramid, and I think that Giraud's very short report says it all, and summarizes our 22 years in space almost perfectly. The universe is infinitely strange.
Project complete.
As recent events have taught us, the galaxy is not an unchanging place. Discovery of hostile alien empires and rich worlds lying between us, as well as advent of space warfare, means that we are forced to shake off bright-eyed optimism of our first 2 decades in the verse, and the sooner we'll be able to do it, the better. But of course, that is not the only change that needs to happen. In order to remain competitive, to be able to protect our assets and acquire new ones, we need to fully adopt automatization. It is a difficult topic, and as such, whenever it is brought up, one question inevitably moves to the front of every discussion. Who stands to lose from automatization? The question is, of course, wrong, and the very fact that it is so frequently asked is a proof enough that we may not yet be ready to truly embrace interstellar economy. In different forms, this kind of question has been asked throughout our entire history, by people who question introduction of steam engines and trains, television or internet, the same kind of people who, back on old Earth, complained about sending a car to space, are currently trying to drag progress of automatization down because of their own insecurities and lack of imagination and basic economic knowledge. For the question they should ask is this: who will gain from automatization? The most obvious answer is employers. Hiring human beings always carries risks. They can get sick, they need to rest, and they often demand payment for their services. And while robots certainly do require maintenance from time to time, once all is said and done, they are simply far more cost and time efficient than their organic counterparts. But of course, we shouldn't focus on those in power, but on those who form the bulk of our nation. So let us see how automatization will affect those who toil in the tunnels and industrial districts, a group that, bizarrely, forms the most vocal core of the opposition. In our current state, automatization is already more widespread than it ever was before. Most of our bureaucracy is left to self-learning computer programs, which help in daily tasks of every existing company and enterprise. It allows us to avoid all the mundane jobs like paperwork in order to focus on bigger goals, and as such, efficiency of almost every single task skyrocketed. No one complained about this, and in fact it seems that the vast majority of the population approve the use of administrative AIs. So why introduction of robots in the mines and factories should be any different? Some will say that a mine operated by robots will put all the delvers that walk there on the street, but that, as you well know, is not true. Robots of today, while certainly more adaptable and resilient than humans, are simply unable to perform more complicated tasks that most of our industries require to function. As such, human interference is still necessary, albeit on a much smaller scale. All the robots do is ensure that we can bypass all the drudgery in between those important moments. For let me ask you this: do delvers really enjoy spending hours in their drills, in ear-shattering noise and terrible heat, while rubble falls all around them? No, they enjoy finding rich mineral veins and extracting them, and thanks to robotic walkers they will be able to focus on just that. Same with factory walkers. The mind-numbing jobs on assembly lines can be left to machines, giving walkers more opportunities to improve the quality of mass-produced goods. And that applies to almost every venture out there. There are countless jobs that are uninteresting, but they still have to be done so that entire industry could function. Introducing robots that can take over those mundane tasks will allow our society to switch its focus to goals more suited to interstellar society, like research or economy. Some will say that it will make our race more lazy, but there is no evidence to support that claim. We haven't stopped walking when cars were invented, nor we haven't stagnated since first spaceships left Earth's atmosphere. If anything, our progress is faster than ever before, and introduction of robotic walkers is simply the next step on the ladder of this progress. For ages we have used crude tools in order to build better tools, and this situation is still continuation of the very same process, only this time our new tools can walk and look vaguely humanoid, which puts some people on edge. But overall, that uncertainty is nothing more but a fear of change, which is such a low instinct that one would think we would have eradicated it by now. So, to answer the question who will profit from the automatization, the answer is, obviously, everyone. In the long run, humanity can only benefit from this invention, and the sooner we'll adapt to it, the faster we'll be able to place ourselves at the forefront of the race for galactic resources. We simply can't afford this bickering. Others may not be as conflicted as we are, and soon we may need every advantage that we can get.